Like I said in my Q1 video, I played a lot of Sea of Stars off stream. Now that I have beat the game, I wanted to talk about the complete package. This first section will be without spoilers, as I feel the game experience without spoiling is best, as most things are, to be honest. I want to emphasize that I will do my best to avoid hitting on things I covered in the first video where I highlighted Sea of Stars. Be sure to check out the Gaming Journal of Q1 for my first impressions. In the last handful of years, I tended to move away from games where you beat it and can endlessly play it. Ones that I have played that need a good number of hours to beat, I set aside for the next shiny game to put into my cart. Now that I am more comfortable in my role as a content producer, I feel this was a game that deserved more than a few paragraphs. When we get to the spoilers, I will give a spoiler warning for those who want to buy the game or currently working through it. This is all coming with the release of the free DLC today, Throes of the Watchmaker. It seemed like the best time for me to give my thoughts on the game as is. Excited to play the DLC as it adds details to a story that happened apart from the main storyline, and adding a new playable character gets me pumped. But more about the main game. For starters, one of the best things Sea of Stars works on is the chemistry between the characters. Valerie, Zale, and Garl start out as childhood friends. When Valerie and Zale go forward with their training to become Solstice Warriors, Garl never abandons those friendships. After all those years of sparsely seeing them, Garl holds on. He even finds a way to sneak up to see them in their training, gifting them cookies. When Gale and Valerie venture off as children, Garl is attacked, losing his left eye, but he never once mentions it as an adult or holds a grudge towards his friends. When the newest Solstice Warriors embark on their adventure, Garl secretly follows them. He is determined to leave Mooncradle to go with his friends, even knowing of the dangers. When Zale and Valerie reiterate the dangers, Garl volunteers to be their cook, which becomes a crucial role in gameplay. Sea of Stars doesn't have a reliance on chefs like you'd come to expect from JRPGs. When traveling about towns, you can take cooking ingredients out of gardens, and enemies drop meat or bones that you can use in recipes. Shops are primarily used for new recipes and better gear for your party, but both of those can be found in chests hidden about the terrain, so stores aren't a major backbone to the game. A major factor that plays into food not being totally essential are the modern conveniences Sea of Stars has. Characters auto-gain mana when they basic attack. When they are KO'd, you are knocked down for 2 rounds. After those rounds, you return with a sizable amount of health recovered. You have combo abilities that do not cost mana that can heal, deal damage, or stun. I have feelings on both sides of the fence with all these makes to where you aren't spending a lot of time loading up on health potions and revives like you would in general RPGs, but it removes much of the difficulty from a lot of combat. Many of the times where I had game over screens was when I was down to only 2 party members due to an in-game event where party members left the group for a bit. Then we get to relics, which are ways you can scale the difficulty through items that you can toggle. If you want just the story and the combat to be an afterthought, this is where you would go. I should have looked more into the relics that add challenge, because that is where I feel was missing from the combat, a challenge. Looking back over them as I write this, there are ones that make your health lower, enemies resisting more damage, and making food unusable in combat. I've always associated those modifiers with ways to make the games less difficult, never more. I have it in my mind to play the game as intended. In the final boss, I had 2 characters get KO'd, but they did not have a game over. Usually, for the final encounter, you face the opposite problem, of never beating them for being so difficult. It's almost like that problem more than it being too easy, as the game it was made without relics. And I can't go on without mentioning this soundtrack though. The music for this game is peak. It's what you've been listening to You've been listening to some of the tracks as I talk my thoughts, but now we're here at the spoilers section, so a big warning. When the party takes the trip on the actual Sea of Stars in the game, the graphics for the cutscene changes from pixel art to 3D. My first thought had me thinking if the developer Sabotage Studio was going to do like they did with their first game, The Messenger, by having a major visual change at the midpoint. It would make sense seeing that Chrono Trigger was pixel art and its sequel Chrono Cross was 3D. I compare it to Chrono Trigger, as I will do numerous times through this review, because the inspirations are obvious. But it doesn't stick to 3D and uses it to emphasize the magnitude of what is happening. The first minutes you are in Soray's world, you are kind of baffled at being in a sci-fi universe. Sabotage Studio leans into this by changing aesthetics of the battle HUD to look more futuristic. Even the battle theme uses the same musical notes, but uses different instruments to give you that technological sound. My big issues come with what I would call the post-game content. To get the true ending of Sea of Stars, you have to do 7 side quests to fight the Fleshmancer, the main villain of the story. Some of those quests aren't too bad, like the puzzles in the Solstice Shrines. They're a nice change of pace compared to an optional boss. The big one that irks me is finding the Rainbow Conches. When I defeated Erlina, the final boss to the traditional ending, I had about 30 Rainbow Conches. There are 60 of them in total. They aren't items that you get as loot. They are items in chests hidden about the map. This is a major amount of busy work to achieve the real ending. To compare this to Chrono Trigger, you can defeat Lavos without any of the optional content. What the optional content gives you is alternate endings. There are a dozen endings based on when and how you defeat the final boss. There is busy work associated with those things, but none is required to beat the game. There are people who beat Chrono Trigger and have no idea that it has other endings. They defeated Lavos and never booted the card up again. This point plays into the in-game content, but for me to flesh out the details, I have to cover some story aspects. I thought the archivist perspective of the game was really cool. Having an in-game character telling the story of characters like he is reading a story is a nice touch. It's almost like the merchant of the Aladdin movies. But then he breaks the story that he is telling by introducing himself into the party, becoming a member. He has limits of things that he can and cannot do due to his relationship with the Fleshmancer. He himself removes himself from being part of the body stemming from complications, leaving a puppet of himself to act as him on the team. But he returns against his old friend in the true ending. I spoke about the character's chemistry earlier. Garl jumps in between his friends and the Fleshmancer as he attacks them, killing the warrior cook. He is gone from the party, even having a funeral for him. This creates an emotional moment for Valerie and Zale, similar to Chrono dying. What the game doesn't tell you is that if you complete the 7 side quests to achieve the true ending, he is revived. This would not bother me if it was a big reward for the in-game content, but to have it and the true ending isn't how I would have done it. When playing through the game, a lot of the complaints about it were the story. I was puzzled at why, when writing up the script for the Quarter 1 video, but after finishing the game, I see it now. With the main villain, the Fleshmancer doesn't make himself known until around the 50% mark. Leading up to the confrontation with him, each dungeon, as I'll call them, so disconnected with him that they don't feel relevant by the end. There were spots where I asked myself if one of the pre-Fleshmancer villains was the main boss. His acolytes are on the screen a good number of times, yet they don't feel like they were fleshed out. Pun not really intended. The easiest character I can look to compare the games is Magus from Chrono Trigger. He has some rivalries with characters like Frog, and you fight him like he is the main antagonist, but through the story you see his motives, and you have the choice of slaying him or recruiting him. With so much time before meeting the Fleshmancer, a distraction antagonist would benefit the first half of the game, not just the leader of a dungeon who you won't see again. The story also falters around Brugraves and Erlina, the mentors of Valerie and Zale. They betray the Solstice Warriors, join the side of the Fleshmancer and the Acolytes. When they do, it feels like a big deal. We have moments where We have moments where we see why Brugge makes the decisions through flashbacks of how they were treated after losing the first Elder who trained them. Their heel turn was shocking, but it didn't pay off like it should have. Similar to Stone Cold Steve Austin's, to keep the wrestling analogy going. Their changes really happen off camera, and Brugge's outcome isn't shown unless you get the true ending. All in all, I would say Sea of Stars is good, but not great. It really has the makings to be a great game, but it was a letdown that it wasn't the classic as it starts out. It just doesn't live up to the potential it has. The first half had me loving much of the game. It uses aspects of classics like Chrono Trigger and Paper Mario, and for the first hours, you were in a state of bliss. But close to the 50% mark, I was starting to see some of the flaws. They aren't flaws that weigh it down to being bad. I can really see people who are newer to RPGs and thinking of it as great or a favorite of theirs. It could be from my prior experience with the great games that I see things hindering it from the greatness. The visuals still are some of my favorite pixel art of all time. The first time I saw an ultimate attack, I was awestruck. When Yeet tosses you in one of the balls for fast travel, you are surprised and baffled. But visuals alone can't carry the game. That's not to say that's the only good thing, it's just the aspect that sticks out most. For the story, it really should have focused more on Valerie, Zale, and Garl. To me, it is a game that didn't need the 6 party members. I can admit that all of them are cool. The game just gets away from the things that worked great early. The childhood friends who grew up, but having differing paths and trying to keep their friendship together, even with their different situations about them. The story in general just tries to do too much. It tries to do what some of the classics do with almost episodic adventures before the big baddie. Where it misses the mark is making them all tie together with a clear manner. It has some reasons why they are relevant, but they aren't fully seen or shown. A prime example for how it's done, mentioning it for the final time, is Chrono Trigger. Specifically when they go back to 65 million BC. When fighting the dinosaurs, you are entirely focused on taking them out, but then they are wiped out by Lavos entirely, connecting them back to the major story. Sea of Stars had similar instances, but they don't feel as connected to the main villain as they should. Overall, I would recommend the game, but I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Still excited for today's DLC though.